Excellencies, guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you didn't have to miss your lunch during this session. Very delighted to have you all today for this event, which is called the Accelerating the Implementation of NDCs and NAPs through Enhanced Access to Finance, Technology, and Capacity Building, experiences from LDCs, SIDS, and other vulnerable countries. I think the topic is quite unique, but it looks at finance, technology, and capacity, and all of this has to work hand in hand to really make the change in our system. To help set our context, I'm going to request my colleague, Sophie Deconic, the Director for Means of Implementation of UNFCCC, to kindly provide opening remarks. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much, Orgia. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, colleagues and friends, I'm really happy to welcome you here today for this event, indeed linking the three critical enablers that are pointed into the Paris Agreement. The IPCC report reminds us that over 3.4 billion people live in contexts highly vulnerable to climate change, and this reality, of course, demands urgent action, especially in least developed countries and small island developing states, who are experiencing severe impacts, as we all know, at the community level in terms of livelihood and natural resources. So these three critical enablers for climate action are negotiated separately here, as we all know. In practice also, as we come to implementation, they're often treated in isolation. Yet experience shows that in order to have the best outcome in terms of climate action for the people we intend to serve, comprehensive approaches to support countries in meeting their climate commitment is essential. This integration is especially relevant as this year the Paris Committee on Capacity Building focus area will be strengthening capacity for designing holistic investment strategies, bankable projects and stakeholder engagement to enhance the NDC and NAP implementation in developing countries. The urgency of climate action requires to move us beyond siloed approach. When we examine, we see this interplay of these enablers working best. We also observe very practically, concretely, that effective capacity building enables countries to access more easily and manage and deploy climate finance with better outcome. We also know that sound financial systems can support, for example, technology development, including at the very local level, and that appropriate technology transfers will build long-term capacities and country capacities at the institutional level. So today we're really privileged, and we'll hear from experience from Fiji, Malawi, Denmark, and the Global Capacity Building Coalition, bringing really different complementary perspectives. So we're really happy, and thank you very much for stepping in to be with us. I really look forward to hear your experiences in creating these integrated approaches to deliver really impact for vulnerable communities. And the purpose of the meeting, the event also is for us to hear your insight to help inform how the UNFCCC and partners can also better support developing countries in the mandate in terms of capacity building and assistance to countries. So thank you very much, and looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Sophie, for setting the scene. As explained by Sophie, it's a delight for us to have an esteemed set of panelists today join us. So I will have the pleasure of introducing them and requesting them to come on the dais. To begin with, we have Her Excellency Lenora Gerigere-Tabua, who is the Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs of Fiji. Thank you. Next, we have His Excellency Owen Chomanika, who is the Deputy Minister of Local Government, Unity and Culture of Malawi. Thanks. Next, we have Simon Vandal Peterson, Deputy Director of Department of Green Diplomacy and Climate of Denmark. And last but not least, we have Simon Thompson, Managing Director of Global Capacity Building Coalition. And my name is Orgo Sineroy. I work as Director for Climate Change in Asian Development Bank, and happy to moderate this session. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go and take this. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. As Sophie mentioned, this aspect of finance, technology, capacity building need to be looked together. So to begin our conversation, I have a couple of rounds of questions for my panelists. Looking at finance and capacity building largely, it'll be great when you respond, try if you can connect the two aspects together, that'll be fantastic. So if it's okay with the Minister of Excellency, I'll start with you from Fiji's point of view. Of course, Fiji is a very vulnerable country, but also a country in Asia-Pacific region is demonstrating great leadership in terms of building resilience. And if I'm not wrong, one of the few first countries, front runners, to issue a blue bond, sovereign bond. It'll be great to hear your experiences in issuing the bond, what kind of interest it has generated from the investors, and what lessons do you have for other SIDS countries who want to pursue this direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Nisam Bulavinaka and warm greetings from the Pacific, ladies and gentlemen. I would just like to start with just by asking you a question. Can I just, by a show of hands, find out how many of you have been to my country, Fiji? 2, 3 in the sound booth. Wow. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for the first question, and thank you for your interest here this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and also to my distinguished panelists. I'll tell you about Fiji. Fiji has actively sought to create homegrown, innovative financial solutions to help bridge that immense gap that we have for adaptation, the gap that we all face, particularly as Pacific SIDS. And the effort to launch Fiji's sovereign blue bond was in part informed by our experience with issuing a sovereign green bond back in 2017. But rather than launch the green bond on international markets, we decided to explore a domestic issuance and attract private sector investors. With a strategic investment of USD 2 million facilitated by the UNDP Rapid Response Facility and the UK government's Blue Planet Fund, the issuance was not only successful but surpassed expectations, yielding a remarkable 5-fold return, which mobilized USD 10 million in domestic private capital. The investments made through Blue Bond proceeds target the creation of over 500 new jobs in Fiji, and by attracting 5 large private sector investors, the Blue Bond has fortified domestic partnerships and interests around our efforts build a resilient blue economy and meeting and supporting many of our 2030 sustainable development goals. And specifically, the Blue Bond has supported 1, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development, and these are initiatives that support the livelihoods of over 10,000 people active in the fisheries sector, with a special focus on empowering women who make up about half of this workforce. Number 2, sustainable towns and cities, with interventions designed to benefit nearly 300,000 people, 50% of which are women, residing in and near our town and city boundaries. The bond proceeds are being used to support robust town and country planning approaches aligned with blue economy principles. 3, coastal protection, very important for us from the Pacific SIDS, financing nature-based solutions projects in 2 vulnerable coastal communities, safeguarding the lives and cultural heritage of over 500 individuals. And finally, sustainable waste management. The bond proceeds have extended the lifespan of Fiji's only sanitary landfill, benefiting over 350,000 residents, 49% of which are women, in the greater Suva area, Suva being the capital of Fiji. And this sector not only ensures the safe management of over 90 tons of waste, but also supports the Water Authority of Fiji's wastewater program that prevents 40 tons of liquid waste from contaminating our environment. And the first lesson that we have learned is that we can take the lead and develop solutions ourselves, and we should not be afraid to innovate. The second lesson is that while bond issuances can raise capital quickly, it is an approach that should be used sparingly for very specific interventions that should be that help to leverage further resources and ensure that investors can be paid back. Bonds are debt instruments. So while we support their strategic use, it is clear that their impact can only go so far and must be complemented by external support, which in its current form is insufficient to address the challenges that we currently face. Bonds can contribute to economic diversification and resilience building, but only if they are used to fund very well developed and targeted investments. And the investments made with the bond proceeds must be practical and ensure that their benefits exceed the costs involved in the investment. It is not a given that investments will yield a sufficient additional capital to offset the costs involved with the issuance, and thus this constitutes a risk. So project identification and selection is critical, and one of the reasons why UNDP and the Fiji government spent a lot of time and resources in selecting appropriate investments. And this was one of the lessons that we learned from our 2017 Fiji Green Bond issuance. Because in this case, the investment projects had not been pre-selected. Further, in order to demonstrate to investors and donors and the public that the projects are delivering their intended benefit, it is important to have the capacity and capability in place for monitoring and evaluation and impact reporting. So continued support is needed to ensure adequate and appropriate monitoring and reporting to a standard expected by the investors. So just in closing, the success of the blue bond issuance depended on our efforts to raise awareness within the domestic market on the benefits of such instruments, especially given the low level of awareness in the domestic market in comparison to that of international markets, where these instruments are more common. So this is something that we have trialed in Fiji.
Thank you, Excellency, so much for sharing the experience of the really homegrown, innovative, in this case, a debt instrument, of course, as you mentioned, which really helps you unlock additional financing opportunities. It was great to also hear about you about the potential outcomes in terms of the jobs created, in terms of the livelihood supported or benefiting women. I think that's very, very important for thematic bonds like this. But also, I think you made a very important point that while the debt instrument is an important instrument, it also needs to be used sparingly. And where possible, we have to see how it can complement with other grant resources, etc. to really. And the last point. Importance of having the right investments, that becomes very critical, right? And the capacity needed to develop the right kind of project that can deliver outcomes. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to move to Malawi now. A lot of discussions globally is about how do we make sure climate finance is reaching the most vulnerable communities and population. While we do see a lot of small-scale boutique projects which are very successful, I think there is a kind of a global recognition that the best approach is to deliver these through government systems, from national to local systems. So if you can just explain maybe with us a little bit about the work that you're doing in terms of strengthening country systems to ensure climate finance is reaching the local communities who need the most, and what has been some of the experiences you've learned from that process in Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In as far as the systems in Malawi are concerned, we are making efforts to strengthen them. Recently, I think it must be some few months ago, through the Ministry of Law Government, Unity and Culture, we have worked on our decentralization policy. And this is a policy that is trying to devolve some powers in as far as decision-making, planning, and the rest are concerned, that it should be done even at the district council levels. And even in the district council levels, we have strengthened a system where we are now embarking on what we call district development plans. And these are also considering even energy issues and even issues regarding disaster risk management. And before we even go to that, we have now adopted a bottom-up approach, because our planning system in Malawi is local. It starts at village. We have what we call village action plans. Then they cascade upwards to area development committees and planning, and it goes to a district development plan. And it's where we work on a consolidation of this to form what we can call a national action plan. So it's along that line. And in as far as decentralization is concerned, yes, we have faced some challenges along the way. And one of the challenges is capacity, because if you want to have a national adaptation plan, for example, a resilience setup, and you want it to cascade down from the village level. We are looking at the capacity of the people to know what they want and they put it within the framework of technicalities and science that is required. It's not all that easy. And in the end, you still find that when the plans are getting upwards, they are still tampered with our knowledge now, the technicalities. But we have managed to do that, and the local government system planning itself, it's now ensuring that every district council, before we go for our annual budgeting, is supposed to raise what we call an annual investment plan. And it should have, we have running across the districts what we call socio-economic profiling. That is done. That takes into account even the hazards and the mitigation challenges that we have within the system. We are continuously running our programming now using performance-based financing. So even we are running a program, we call it Governance for Enabled Service Delivery. It's also co-financed by the World Bank. This is where district projects are financed depending on the performance of such districts in other areas also. So these three elements of decentralization and the local government planning system and the performance-based financing mechanism is what we are now doing to make sure that there's at least an enhanced capacity, strengthening the system. And we are looking at how does even this performance-based works with the access to climate financing. Currently, we are working on a program. We call it performance-based climate resilience grants. We have piloted in 3 districts, and it is showing very robust and very good outcomes to a point that we might cascade it to other districts. This is a climate financing, and we're working it with the local adaptation, local climate adaptive living facility. So we have tried it that way, and the challenges we have met is the same thing of capacity building and the resource constraints. Resources will never be enough, but sometimes we have too thin an envelope to do what you can do, mainly if it is involving the locals. And another thing is even the conditionalities of this financing. When you look at the facility like the local climate adaptive living facility, the conditions to a certain extent are too restrictive that you spend more time chasing to fulfill the conditions instead of spending more time chasing to do the required performances. But all in all, we are trying so hard as a country, as a republic, to ensure that the communities and the country, we are able to survive. Because recently we have faced a lot of cyclones. In fact, just the past 2 years, we have faced a number of cyclones, and most of the catastrophes we have faced are climate-related. We have lost more than 2,000 people because of these cyclones. Currently, we are facing food shortages because of El Niño and all these. All these are climate-related shocks and problems we are facing. But we are trying to work out ourselves and sort ourselves out.
Thank you for sharing this great example. I think this is a very unique case where you're demonstrating how you're using your national decentralization systems to deliver outcomes, both development and climate outcomes at the local level. Because we often know that local level communities want livelihoods, they want their health, their infrastructure. They don't differentiate between what's development, what climate at the end of the day, right? But so in addition, reach the people, this is also a clear example where the focus is on the quality. I think that's a very important point of discussion in this in this COP also, the quality of finance, because this is a continuous decentralization process. It's not a one-off financing, but continuous financing required by the local community. So thanks for highlighting that, and also the issues around capacity and local institutional building. And great to know the locals' work. That's really shaping the results. Thanks. I'm going to move to you, Simon, from now. So we heard about one example of a financing instrument, a debt instrument in this case. We heard of another example of a way of delivering the finance. Now, of course, all of this has to be aggregated at a national level, at an NDC or a NAP level. So from your point of view, what are some of the new approaches one can actually deploy to mobilize resources for NDC and NAP implementation in developing countries? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, a good place to start is talking about blended finance models. And Denmark has presented several models the last couple of years and has, in addition to our overall climate finance, where we allocate 60% to climate adaptation, we are in a parallel track trying also to move blended finance into the adaptation space. And one of the very good example of this, and a very fresh example, is the new IFCAP, the Innovative Finance Facility for Climate in Asia and Pacific. I think that is a new record of a hard approbation, even at COP. But IFCAP was launched this week and is a guarantee of $2.5 billion that is can mobilize 11 $1 billion, where Denmark, together with 8 countries, has gone together with the ADB. And thank you for the leadership on this, with this groundbreaking new climate finance tool. And this is also, I think, one of the largest climate finance transaction this year. So also an important message to send at this COP29. The new instrument is also available for SIDS, and Denmark has provided $100 million. And this instrument is also interesting, considering that we use 40% to mitigation and 40% to adaptation, 60% to mitigation, and that's actually quite new for an instrument like this. So I think it has a very good balance between adaptation and mitigation. And it's also an instrument that somewhat accommodates what was mentioned in the initial remarks. We're trying to combine a capacity building, technology, and finance, because a lot of projects try to reach these 3 essential KPIs. One of the first project will be in Pakistan, where we try to use waste oil to create green fuels, and in the same time also ensure capacity building with a gender aim as well. So in that way, with the first project, we're trying to ensure both capacity building, technology, and finance. And a lot of these projects are, of course, also supposed to support the implementation of the NDCs and NAPs. But what we see from a general point of view in our engagement, and especially when we talk about finance tools, is that it's easy to support the overall NDC levels, but we need some more concrete more concrete indicators in the NDC, especially for financial point of view.
Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing the IFCAP, and thanks for Denmark's support. I think we have a lot of discussions internally, and as you rightly said, while this is an innovative mechanism to provide additional, through guarantee, additional headrooms for countries to invest in adaptation and mitigation, at the end of the day, countries need to have the right project pipeline. Otherwise, you can't finance it. And for that project pipeline, you need to have the capacity, the institutions in place to identify the right project, the right kind of indicators and outcome indicators, essentially. I think that's a very important point. So thanks for sharing that. And to move to the other, Simon. So, of course, we heard a lot about countries and sovereign sector, public sector financing. But we know at the end of the day, private sector would need to play an important role, and specifically through financial institutions at the country, at the local level. So how can local financial institutions, better mobilize, private sector climate finance from your point of view? Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Well, let's remember, when we are thinking about capacity building, what are we actually talking about? So, to me at least, this is about building the capabilities of institutions. I would suggest not just domestic financial institutions, but the finance sector overall, and the competence of individuals within those financial institutions. Really, and wider than that, I think the Minister made a very good point about actually building the capacity of villages as well, and then moving that up through the ecosystem. Because in the finance system, we want to get to the point where every professional financial decision takes account of climate change. That's the ultimate goal. So we're really trying to build the capacity of the finance sector overall, and reshape the culture of the finance sector overall, so every professional financial decision takes account of climate change. Now, if we can do that, and that is a big, audacious goal, then hopefully we can mobilize financial capital we can then also access and deploy the technological capital. This is coming to the sort of three capitals that Simon alluded to, and then we can develop the human capital as well. So there's three aspects to it. Really, two things I would like to see, or the private finance sector would like to see, and stands ready to support. One is to develop broad and deep communities of practice. So I think a lot of capacity building, whether it's for institutions or individuals, takes place in vertical silos. So we do capacity building for ministries, or we do capacity building for public sector officials, or we do capacity building for finance professionals. I think we need to bring together the ministries, the public sector, public and private finance, and the real economy as well, at all levels, from the village upwards, so that we are learning together and shaping the world we want to see together. And then secondly, I think we also need to catalyse local capacity building ecosystems, which is part of the role of the GCBC, and we should be prioritising activities that build sustainable national and regional capacity building organisations and initiatives, and moving away from the very well-intentioned fly-in, fly-out model. But one thing that does, I think, inadvertently, is it creates a market failure where the local capacity building institutions don't have the chance to develop. And I think the model of the Fiji Blue Bond is a wonderful one. We should be supporting more of those kind of initiatives, so that countries, domestic financial sectors are developing the instruments, the financing tools that they need, and surrounding that you have the ecosystem of the professional advisors who will help with the bond issue, and so on and so forth. And I think the final point, picking up on some of the points Simon made, is particularly in the context of financing more ambitious NDCs and national adaptation plans. The private sector very much wants to see much more detail. I think I'll pick up on Simon's point there. I think there's a role for the government and private sector to develop that together. Again, this is a bit about building a common community of practice, bringing the ministries and the real economy actors and finance together to develop things like much more detailed sectoral pathways, sectoral decarbonisation priorities, understanding national and regional and potentially village level investment priorities, project pipelines, and so on. Because each of those, when you break that down, that creates the investable, the bankable projects that a high level sort of national plan doesn't.
Thank you, Simon, for highlighting the importance of actually truly engaging with the private sector in a much more systematic manner in the planning process and the investment in the design process to help identify what the opportunities are and where they can really come in. If I can just move to the second round on Cyber Excellency again with you from Fiji Expand. So you, of course, have an ambitious national adaptation plan, which has identified many priorities. How do you see access to finance, capacity building, and technology can really help you in implementation of the plan, which is, of course, ultimately what we want at the end of the day?
Just to the members of my panel, I'm sorry, I'm going to lean forward because my legs are much shorter than yours, so I feel like a little child. I felt like I would start swinging my legs back and forth just then. Thank you for the question, Mr. Roy. Delivering robust adaptation outcomes is no easy task in a climate vulnerable nation, especially one like mine with very limited resources. So access to climate change is critical. Yet, the complicated process and the delayed disbursements slow this progress, and they restrict the scale at which we can work. We urgently need simpler, faster access to funding, particularly for adaptation projects like community relocation. And as we speak this week, there is one community that is being relocated in Fiji. It was hammered during Cyclone Ana in 2021, if I'm not wrong. And we've figured out that to relocate this one small community is going to cost us no less than $3 million USD. However, we have 676 communities that are on the list of communities that will need to be relocated over the next few years. So This is vital to safeguarding lives, and that's why we need those funds. And technology and capacity building are, of course, essential. And Simon, what you said is absolutely right. Fiji has adopted renewable energy solutions and early warning systems, but scaling these efforts requires affordable, adaptable technologies tailored to our unique needs. Building local expertise, like Excellency Owen said, and institutional capacity is equally important to ensure that we can utilize new technology and be in a position to access adaptation options using the best available science, data, and evidence. And sustained support for capacity building is important. We struggle to derive meaningful and lasting capacity building benefits from two-day workshops, short-term consultations, overseas training. For Fiji and many others, we need resources for capacity building that we can utilize in a flexible way, as the restrictions that exist often prejudice the support that we need in an unhelpful way. There may be international expertise out there that can help us, but that expertise is not relevant if it is not contextualized to our own issues. But, despite these obstacles, as you said, Mr. Roy, Fiji has shown leadership. We were the first country to ratify the Paris Agreement, and we remain committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. We do have the policies and structures in place to deliver against our priorities. However, the nature, the scope, the scale, and the approach of much of the support we receive is problematic, and reflects a top-down approach that is increasingly difficult to translate to localized needs. So we hope the NCQG can address access issues, as well as the overall need for increased climate finance flows, because honestly, the window that we have to deliver effective adaptation is getting smaller and smaller. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding us of the urgency of moving fast and moving quicker, but also highlighting the importance of capacity building initiatives as a longer term that are flexible and builds on local capacity of institutions. Importance of technology, but technology that then enables local institutions, local stakeholders, local private sector to come in and explore. And now, last but not the least, the importance of simple and faster access to finance, global climate finance. Thanks to that, I'll pass on to Excellency from Malawi, from you. From capacity building point of view, what has been your experience in building national and local and even community capacities for accessing climate finance?
Thank you very much. I think I will start by what the colleague said, that in all things we need to talk about right projects. Now, the question we should be always asking is, right to who? It should be a right project to who? To the financier or to the person who is experiencing it? That's where localization comes in. Because when we talk of the locals, when we talk of a right project, right, it should be right to Malawi. It should not be right to the World Bank because they are funding us. They bring a pastor of any country that is financing. You bring conditions that are very difficult within your own thematic areas and say these are predetermined. We might not get a right program in that case or a project. What is right should be when it changes the lives of the people who are experiencing the effects of those climate change issues. Now, I think when it comes to right, that's where now we look at how do we use local structures, local institutions. And it was already said about capacity that, yes, we are able to capacitate institutions, but also which institutions are we capacitating? Are they still the middle institutions or the end institutions? Because at the end of it all, communities should have capacity. At the end of it all, government should have capacity. At the end of it all, the individuals, the locals, the Malawians themselves should have the capacity. I think in as far as that is concerned, we have managed to make a few strides. Not many, a few strides, because when it comes, for example, to the national determined contribution setup, it is the responsibility of our Minister of Energy to do that. And so far, we have a number of Malawians who have been trained in energy data management. And at the same time, at least as 2023, we're able to publish some energy data that is now taken directly from our people. The people who are experiencing this. So when it comes to capacity, we're talking of even creating proper work relationships proper connectivity and linkages to say, where do you get this data? And what is the format of this data? Because you see, there's a certain data that you can generate from here. But there's something that you can also generate down there in the district amidst the locals who are experiencing that. Typically, as the indigenous, we also have our own adaptive mechanisms that we would wish they should also be used, because that is what has kept us surviving for years and years. Now, if you just come with new ones, it becomes difficult. So we are looking at adaptive mechanisms and mitigation mechanisms that is building our capacity to sustain what we already know. And that has been a challenge, of course, but so far so good. I think we are using engagements and even the learning is a little bit exchanging. So when you come with your finances and all the projects you have conceptualized, we will always sit you down. We'll always say, no, come sit here. Or what is it? And this is what you want, yes. But I think this is also the way we should do it. We have developed ourselves the courage of being able to say what we want as a republic, as a country, as a people. We have developed that. And down in even in the areas, we have what we call village civil protection committees. These are also at least capacitated. They know what is the early warning sign systems. It should be localized. And in the course of being localized, it becomes cheaper, because we don't have all the finances. So far, I think in capacity building, we are using engagement and also trying to learn from others. Not that we have closed out from learning. So when science comes and so on, we are able to open up. And the financing mechanisms, mostly it's the conditions that we are looking at to say, what is capacity to you, and what is capacity to us as a country, and what is capacity to our people? Because as leadership of the country, we have people who we are leading, and they need to have that capacity to understand things. When you say, at this conservation area, you are not building, we are relocating you. What restrictions are there? What makes them to revolt and say, no, we are not moving? This is where our ancestors are. You need proper capacity to build these people to understand that I think this is the way to go. And it takes a lot of engagement. Yeah.
Thanks for reminding us that at the end of the day, every climate action is essentially responding to the needs of the most vulnerable. And I think the importance of downward accountability that we as institutions and other partners should have towards the people is of utmost importance. But also for highlighting the importance of the local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, the data plays. We often think money is as power, but actually data in the context of climate adaptation has the main power. If you don't have the local context specificity, then you can't have any effective solution. Thanks for reminding that. Simon, I'll move to you. So in terms of Denmark's support for capacity building wider to global partnership, you can share with us some of the work they've been doing. Thank you.
Sure. In Denmark, we have quite a horizontal approach to capacity building in our development engagement. So every time we conduct a development project, we always try to have a capacity building component. But I very much agree with what Owen said, that it's important that it's also demand-driven, especially in the adaptation space. So we really try to ensure that when we talk about capacity building and in adaptation, that it's also locally, it accommodates local demand. So we try to have an iterative approach where we ensure a horizontal approach before we start, but then also try to cover the demand, especially in the adaptation field. But I will also like to share two concrete examples of how we work with capacity building in our global partnership. And one is in the NDC partnership. Denmark is co-chairing currently the NDC partnership, and we are trying to speed up capacity building with all NDC partners, and to ensure ambitious NDC and also the implementation of the NDC. And the reason why I'm mentioning this right now, because I think it's quite relevant that when we talk about unlocking investment, capacity building and technology transfer to the NDC, that it's one thing is to ensure the implementation, but the due date for submission of the NDCs is within 3 months' time. So it's important to keep in mind in this discussion that it's crunch time, and we actually don't have that much time. Even though you pass the due date for the submission, it's still a year from now, the final NDC. So I think it's important to mention in this discussion that it's even though we should have a long-term focus, there is also a short-term focus in terms of the NDCs. The second example I want to share, and I very much agree with what Simon said about ensuring a horizontal and more unified approach or a less silo approach to capacity building. And we try to do that in Denmark by our Danish Energy Partnership Program. That is a program where we take civil servants who are experts within areas where we in Denmark have developed a key competitive advantage, that is energy efficiency, energy planning, and renewable energy scale up. And we post experts and ensure there is a close dialogue on the local demand, and then try to have a more unified and horizontal approach on how we capacity build, but also ensure that it's widespread and it's accommodate local demands.
Thank you, Simon, for sharing the examples. I can surely show from my point of view, NDC Partnership is a very effective platform to really respond to the needs, and often needs that are not very planned, but it comes ad hoc, but also has to be responded at the end of the day. Thank you for that. I'll go move to Simon for the last question. So private sector, of course, an important role plays. What kind of capacity building support is required for the private sector to then enable investments in climate? Thank you.
Well, let's remember that even in a small country, the finance sector, the private finance sector, is very heterogeneous. You have at one level the national, the regional, the international development banks, and so on. You have a banking sector, often not necessarily capital market focused, but more sort of retail, commercial banking, and in fact, but in developed countries as well, the great majority of finance is actually straightforward bank lending of various types. While there's still a lot of room for innovation in sustainable finance and other areas of finance, actually we probably don't need a huge array of new complex structures or products. Most of them exist. Most commercial banking products can be given a sustainability lens in a fairly straightforward sort of manner. And we shouldn't forget the important role of other banking type institutions such as credit unions, savings banks, cooperative banks, sort of microfinance, which actually can be quite significant actors. There's the insurance sector as well. There's been some announcements on Finance Day here about the role of insurance to de-risk climate finance on a commercial basis. Clearly plays a role in managing climate risk, improving resilience and adaptation for many communities. And then, of course, bringing this all together, there's blended finance and the role that ADB and institutions like yourselves sort of play in bringing all of that together. It seems to me that the area where perhaps private finance can play a really important role in capacity building itself is in supporting the SME sector. And I think this is as important in emerging markets and developing economies as it is in developed economies too. So I think there's a role for private finance to play in help to build the capacity of local business associations, chambers of commerce, small business associations and so on, helping them in turn support their members to develop the sort of bankable sort of projects and so on they can bring forward. As well as working with kind of key business advisors. So accountants are very often key business advisors to small businesses and so on. And I think, again, banks can directly support accountants who in turn can support sort of SMEs. But in terms of that's capacity building that the banks and finance sector themselves can do, in other words, a bit of paying it forward, which I think is very much necessary. Then there's also the role what capacity building those financial institutions need themselves to be put in a position to do that. I think there's probably four things quickly. One would be to make good use of market standards such as the green loan principles, sustainability linked loan principles. Even if not fully, just use them as a starting point, because those are sort of developed primarily for syndicated lending markets. Perhaps they're more relevant to sort of mid-cap kind of lending. But the basic principles there are highly accessible. Join some of the peer networks, such as the Principles for Responsible Banking, the Principles for Sustainable Insurance, or regional equivalents of these. I think these are really good communities of practice for learning. To come back to the early point I made, and you made this absolutely as well, to work with the local universities, the local business schools, the local professional bodies and associations to build that capacity locally to continue support the development of the finance sector. And then finally, I'll talk my own book for 10 seconds. Make use of the Global Capacity Building Coalition. We are a new organisation designed to build the capacity of the private finance sector, particularly in emerging markets and developing economies. In New York, we launched the beta version of our global capacity building platform, which is fully accessible with no fee in 8 languages, and we'll be growing that in the future. And it contains resources from now. The membership is, I think, as of today, about sort of 80 members who are providing those resources free of charge, and that can help finance institutions deploy or align their activities and decisions with sustainable finance. From next year, we'll also have some limited grant funding available to support capacity building activities in emerging markets. So please come and see us if we can help.
Thank you. Surely look forward to engaging with this coalition. I am going to now open up for discussion. We have 5 minutes or so. So if you have any specific questions to the panelists, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and go for it. Yes, please. Keep your intervention, please, short so we can take more comments. Thanks.
I am Fawzi Younis from Egypt, working in Desert Research Center. My question for Dr. Simon about how can integrated capacity building local with global. How is it found this way to be more effective about climate action? Especially I am working about this point from 14 years ago locally, and enjoying with the United European Union with open dialogues of climate change to building capacity our native people, individuals, to can get the solution from our community. And also I would like to be engagement or integrated with global capacity building to can get more benefit and get more capacity building for everywhere. And thank you so much.
Let me take couple of questions, maybe. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Charu Manchir. I am the president of the United Nations Association in Portland, Oregon. And I'm a retired professor. I specifically had a question for all of you on the education side of it. You mentioned engagement. You did too. We all did. Engagement is so important in getting the education about what are the 5 to 10 very key important things that everybody must know about climate. Sometimes the children will bring that information back to the parents, or reverse. But I'm not clear as to what is happening in your countries, what is happening in the larger, and I think it would be really helpful to know how we can also participate in what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more question on the back over here, colleague, please.
My name is Naomi Nasoro Omari. I represent World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts from Tanzania Girl Guide Association, representing more than 10 million of girls. And my question is how gender, poverty, and climate vulnerability can be integrated in NDCs and NAPs, mainly in prioritizing women's justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, Naomi. Thanks a lot. So we have one question around gender, poverty, climate in the NAPs and NDCs, one on capacity building, one on education. I don't know, Simon, do you want to start from your side?
Yeah, sure. On the specific question, how to integrate locally and globally, and I think it's called oxymoron. It's meaning that that's some sort of a contradiction. But what we try to do in Denmark, as I mentioned, the Danish Energy Partnership, that's where we, on the one hand, try in an initial phase of a development engagement, try to understand the specific local needs, while also across country gather experience to have a more tailor-made approach to refine how we make a tailor-based approach. So I think it's the combination of one, trying in the initial phase to understand the specific need, and second, also sharing among our development engagement the specific experience so we can make more professional tools in the future. That's at least how we have done so within our program for the last 20 years.
I want to take a question on gender, poverty, climate, and how do you reflect this NDC NAPs? I don't know, anybody on the panel? Yes, please.
Firstly, I think just if I can take even the first one,
yes, please,
because it was about what is happening in your country as far as education is concerned. I think since we, for the past 4 years, we have now a mushrooming number of programs that are emerging in as far as universities are concerned. We even have a new university that has just from 4 years that is very much in energy issues. It's called Malawi University of Science and Technology. And there's also a mushrooming of technical colleges that are doing a lot of basic programming in as far as like solar technology is concerned, solar fixings and all those. It's happening and it's growing because we are going for alternative sources of energy. But the lady there asked a good question in as far as how do we incorporate gender issues in national adaptation plans and mitigations. You see, for example, in Malawi, women are the most affected. Because you see, it starts even from an element of, for example, firewood. These are the people who fetch firewood where I come from. Men don't fetch firewood. Where I come from, women go and fetch firewood. And to a certain extent, all the knowledges we are now putting in place when organizations come and even as government, we are now having what we are calling energy-saving stoves. You find that the beneficiaries are mostly women. We are targeting women because there's a gender portion of what climate implications is, and mostly it's on energy, household energy, and here we are looking into this. And another issue has been even in health sector. You see, the most people who are using the health system in Malawi are women. That's the data where I come from. Women are using the health system because men are trying to shy away from getting advice and getting to the hospitals quickly and so on. That's why men are dying earlier in where I come from. Now, even in making sure that we have access, all-round access in these hospitals, there's a need to stress on women, empower them in their groups and so on, put a lot of effort in educating women because these are the people who understand issues of deforestation. They are the most affected. So that's what we are doing mostly in all these things. And we are even capacitated because settlements when they happen, resettlements when they happen, cyclones, they have affected women mostly because these are the household keepers. And that's why all initiatives, whether they are economic and all those interventions, village savings and lendings, all these things, initiatives, we are targeting women because these are the most affected. And women in Malawi are the most key household keepers.
Thank you. I wonder if anybody else wants to respond. Yes, please, Simon. Go ahead.
I was going to respond to the lady's question here about the 5 or 10 things that make a difference in education. We haven't got time for 5 or 10 things, I know. So let me give you 2. First thing, I think I would like every child, every adult, every butcher, every baker, every candlestick maker, even every banker to know that they can make a difference. That's the most important thing to teach. And the second thing I would teach people is, if you can, vote. Make your voice heard.
Very important. Any last word from you, Excellency?
Thank you very much. I know we're running out of time very quickly. So yes, I think vote, and this is one for both ladies who asked the questions. Vote. This is vitally important. Vote for the person who is talking the talk that you want to hear, whether it's laws in your parliament that make sure that the standing committees think about gender when they're scrutinizing bills and laws that come before them in parliament, and education. You know, we talk about secondary and tertiary education, but in Fiji, I would like to know how many children in primary school know how many birds are no longer in existence on our shores because of what everybody else is doing. So I think knowledge about our own cultural ways of preserving food, how important it is to be able to see what the signs are telling us. In Fiji, where I come from the islands, and when you see certain things happening with birds, we'll know, oh, there's 8 days of bad weather coming. So this kind of knowledge should be passed on. So it's not just head knowledge, but also very traditional heart knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we very clearly heard from this excellent panel that, of course, climate challenges are there, but solutions are known, and we are seeing solutions in every country, in every single stakeholders or at community level. Solutions are responding to communities, are hearing based on the data that communities have, and really trying to demonstrate the power of local solutions. We also have great examples from financial instruments, whether debt instruments or guarantee instruments that are being now used for adaptation purposes. We're looking at financial models like decentralization models to deliver impacts on the ground, and of course capacity building, including the private sector and financial institutions, the domestic financial institutions. There are a few challenges, of course, there in terms of flexibility, looking at long-term solutions, working with local capacity building of local institutions. That's important. But I think the scale of the problem is so big now, and the urgency is so much, we cannot continue to think about finance, capacity building, and technology, as Sophie was said, in isolation. This has to be thought about together. So as a system, we can try change the whole narrative and the way finance can flow towards the actions that will deliver outcomes on the ground. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and thanks a lot for the panelists for joining us. Thank you so much.